I've come across some issues that I think don't get talked about enough. Primarily, how certain loopholes in the medical industry actively cause harm to some queer people. As a queer person who grew up in a rural town, I grew up hearing about how being gay was wrong. So, around middle school age, when I started realizing that I might be gay, I was terrified. I thought there was something wrong with me for a very long time. At the time, my biggest fear was one, being gay, and two, how would marriage look like in the future? Now that I'm older, my biggest fear has shifted. Yes, I'm still worried about my rights to marry and adopt and such. However, I've become more and more concerned with specifically insurance and the healthcare industry. Knowing that I have some genetic problems that I might develop in my later years, I'm very concerned on what rights I might have to healthcare, primarily what loopholes can be used against me to deny me that care. When it comes to laws based on beliefs, there's a lot of gray area. There should be a balance that's maintained. The rights of religious people should not have to suffer for the rights of gay people. However, the rights of religious people shouldn't diminish the rights of gay people either. Unfortunately, in the legal system, there's a lot of loopholes that religion uses as a way to defend hate towards gay people. The idea that gay people are inherently anti family and against religion and against God is not something that was just used against gay people. Back in the day, it was used as a way to argue why interracial marriage wasn't allowed. It was also used in the arguments against women's suffrage. It was seen as women's suffrage was anti God and anti family, and interracial marriage was also seen as anti family. These are the same arguments that have been made for years and decades that are now just being turned against gay people. I bring this up because it's this kind of false idea that leads to laws allowing the medical industry to discriminate people under the ideas of religion. There are protections in place, like the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act, that creates a federal law prohibiting hospitals from denying emergency care to people. Unfortunately, this law can be undermined by religious hospitals having no obligation to disclose whether they are religious or not, and specifically what treatments they deny. This lack of transparency can cause women to unknowingly plan to deliver babies at hospitals that do not offer services due to policies on religious objections. Some women have only learned that these services were not offered at hospitals while on the operating table after an emergency C section. These are issues that are not talked about when it comes to giving religious institutions certain exemptions from the law. I'm not saying that religious liberties should not be protected, but that institutions need to be completely transparent in what services they offer. In the case of an emergency where the patient has been rushed to the facility simply because it was closest, certain religious exemptions should not apply. According to US Supreme Court decisions, religious liberty stops when it begins to harm another individual. And yet, the religious exemptions given to health clinics allow hospitals to completely deny all services based on religious principles, unless it is an absolute emergency. With the high number of religious hospitals and the lack of transparency on which hospitals are religiously based, it can be argued that complete refusal of care being denied based on something like sexuality or religious belief goes against those previous set precedents. It's not uncommon for families to be completely turned away from a hospital simply because one person of the family is gay. I do not think a hospital, despite being religiously based, has the right to deny care to people based on something like sexuality, especially if that hospital is the only one in the area. As previously mentioned, I live in a rural town, meaning if I was denied access to the one hospital in our area, I would be left with the only other hospitals being a good distance away. All of this isn't taking into account the possibility of being denied insurance based on hospital or sexuality. I'm talking about this so that people can be aware and look into what services are actually being provided by any given hospital. I'm also bringing this to attention in hopes that more can be done in the future to curb this.